On today's episode of The Rig Doctor, we're going to be looking at how to troubleshoot your pedal board and the best practices for you to diagnose a problem as quickly as possible. I'm also going to show you some real easy pedal board best practices in terms of keeping a great rig going strong for a long period of time. We're actually going to be looking at a rig here that I built 10 years ago, and I just recently got it back just for a good sprucing up and just to change out a few pedals. And I want to show you some of the things that I do as far as maintenance and cleaning the rig, and something that you want to do on an ongoing basis, and also just how to go and test your board, whether there's a problem or not, to try to induce some failures. So stay tuned, let's check out this board. My name is Marangella. I build rigs for the industry's top professionals. Now, I'm teaching guitarists how to build rigs like the pros, with DIY tips, easy mods, and all the tricks of the trade. I am the Rig Doctor. Howdy folks, Uncle Mason here, the Rig Doctor. Today we're going to be giving you my best practices in order to keep your pedal board clean and tidy and keeping it well maintained throughout the year. These are the type of things that you're going to want to do, what I say, quarterly to your rig. This is in terms of cleaning it, good maintenance, checking your cables, both audio and power, and how to keep the pedals clean and functional throughout the year so that you never run into issues with the function of your pedals not working or running into any problems with the gear on your rig. Let's get into it. I haven't seen this board in almost 10 years. This is one of the first pedal boards that I ever built under the Vertex name, and it clearly has had quite a bit of use. There's some things that are different on it. I'm going to show you a picture of what it looked like when I first sent it out to him and how it looks now. And he's in need of a little pedal board TLC. We're going to be going through this. We're going to be checking all the cables, making sure all the connections are good. We're going to be going through all the DC cables, making sure everything is delivering power appropriately. We're going to clean all the pedals, and we're going to clean the pedal board surface and just kind of give this a nice good once over. And I'm going to walk you through each one of these parts so that you can repeat this with your particular rig, and also some easy troubleshooting tips on how you can make sure if you have a problem, how to best diagnose what that is. So as you can see, this thing is pretty dirty. I'm actually going to take it outside here to dust this thing off with the tone brush. Again, tone brush is just a standard paintbrush that we're using to kind of get off some of this stuff, and then maybe I'll even use some compressed air on this one just to get it extra clean since it's been so dirty. So let's do that. So we got all the big stuff off. I'm not going to say that it is the absolute cleanest board. If we wanted to get in there and really get it clean, we could use a little bit of Goo Gone or a little bit of a solvent just to kind of get the any of the sticky stuff off. I think we got the main stuff. I'm going to go back and just hit a little bit more some Goo Gone on sort of the individual spots that are most affected, and then we're going to get into getting these pedals dialed in. So let's clean up this board. We'll get the pedals dialed in. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention that I thought about as I was doing this. This is a pretty simple pedal board where everything's in line. If you had a switcher, you might want to label the cables to say what they're going to and from when you were taking it apart, just so it would be easy for you to put it back together and not have any confusion about where things went. Because this is small, I didn't do that, but it would be a good idea to do that if you have a larger board or something that's more complicated where not everything is just in a simple like one-by-one process. You know, I have all the notes from where I built this so I know where everything goes. But if that weren't the case, or you were starting fresh, or you needed to do it to somebody else's board, or you haven't touched your board in a long time, it might be a good idea to label those cables before you take stuff off, just so you know how to put it back together when you're done. So let's clean up this board. Here we go. Alright, so I'm feeling like we did pretty good here, kind of getting the basics cleaned up. I don't feel like there's going to be any big dirt or grime that's going to get into the pedal board, so I'm just going to set this aside for now. And I'm I'm going to get into doing individual pedals. So I'm going to give you like a quick walkthrough on one, and I'm going to do all these. So the thing that you need to do first, it's a good idea just to tone brush the big stuff off. Cool. So this has got all the big stuff off. Now if you wanted to get in more detail, you could use a really gentle sort of like, thing like Goo Gone or something like that, and kind of get into the pedal itself. This is really more aesthetic at this point with the big stuff off. And if you wanted to make your pedals look as new as possible, you could do this, but it's not going to affect the functionality in any way. So that's just something that should be known going into it. This is just sort of if you really want to tweak out and have a really clean, pristine pedal. Now on this particular pedal, I know that internally there's all these guards from me being able to get to the actual circuit, but I know that it's all PC board mounted, so I don't need to worry about things spinning. If I go to tighten the foot switch, it's going to be mounted to something internally. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to do that to the jacks. And then I'm also going to feel the knobs to see if they feel loose. If they do, then I would also want to tighten those. But these actually feel pretty secure. So that's the T-Rex replica. Now what I'm going to do is spray it with contact cleaner. Next what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some Deoxit D5. I'm going to link this below. And you want to hit all of your jacks with it. So I got 1, 2, 3, and the DC. But here's the kicker. You can't just spray them. You also need to use a jack and work in this plug. So plug it in, plug it out a few times, kind of work it in. And then you can also take a power cable. I'm just using an individual plug, and you're going to do the same on the DC. And that just works in the contact cleaner to make sure that these jacks are going to be nice and well maintained. Again, I recommend Deoxit D5. That is the best contact cleaner in my opinion. So we're done now with the T-Rex. I'm going to repeat with everything else. Alright folks, here's a real easy trick. We're almost through with doing all the pedals, but one thing about Boss pedals is it's very difficult to put Velcro on the surface, and if it's not a vintage Boss pedal or anything with a significant amount of value, you can just take something to kind of pry off that rubber. Now the problem is it leaves this residue. It's not particularly attractive, and it's not great for mounting Velcro. But all you need to do is just remove the bottom plate. And just turn it over. And then you have a beautiful side to mount your Velcro to. So here we go. We have a beautiful, nice mounting surface here, nice and clean. So we'll re-Velcro this thing. That was added before my time, or after my time I should say, so I didn't do that one. Otherwise I would have done that trick. Here's an old Vertex interface. As you can see, this was at a time when size of things on pedal boards was not so critical.
You build that by hand?
Yeah, look at that. That's a way old Vertex buffer. This is built on a Jack Orman PC board. They don't make them like that anymore. Wow. Crazy. I think there's a serial number on this one. It's before I was serializing them. Wow. Cool. So that concludes us cleaning all the pedals. Everything is tightened. Everything is ready to go back on the board. So we're going to start putting stuff on there. We're going to start maybe like redressing some of the cables and making sure everything is a good fit. So let's get into it. So quick check-in. I've started to put down some new zip tie mounts. Some of the older zip ties that I used, I guess, didn't really have great adhesive. We have subsequently switched to 3M adhesive, so I haven't had a problem with that, but these guys literally just lift right off. So I had to replace quite a few of these. I'm just kind of rerouting power here not really having to do much in terms of changing positioning of things, but it's definitely not as efficient of a way to do things as it was. But we're making it work. I've mounted a new riser on here. I felt like these old risers that were made out of wood were really high relative to what we needed, and so I just went with a 1-inch riser. So we're going to mount these guys down to that, so it's a little bit more graduated. And then on the back row, we're going to move the tremolo right there. So this should be easy. And again, the tremolo, he told me, it's not something he hits a whole lot, and so he said that could be really out of the way. So that's what I'm going to do. And then, of course, the wah pedal is going to go right here on the side. And you know, one thing that we're going to do before we really start putting the power cables back together is I'm just going to go through and do a quick test once I have them in the positions that I want them. So I'm going to show you how to do that next after I kind of have my basic layout done, so that we can make sure that all the power cables are working before we go in to actually going into seeing if the patch cables are working and then doing some actual audio testing. So finishing this part up where we're just kind of getting everything routed and dressed for power, then we're going to get into testing. So follow me to that. We're going to speed this up, kind of go through all the power. Quick check-in. I'm just going to do everything here to just get the power as dialed in as possible, and then I'm going to test. What that's going to entail is me taking the multimeter, making sure that we're getting the voltage readings, the polarity readings that we want before I plug them into their respective pedals. If that doesn't work, then I'm going to go back and check the individual cables that weren't showing that they were producing the voltage or the polarity, and make sure I get those fixed. Once we're done there, I'm going to go through and actually do a sound check on the cables, make sure that everything is looking good. And then from there, we may need to terminate and change a few things. I'm sure that there's going to be some cables that maybe are a little scratchy, that may need to just be touched up on the solder. If not, we'll just re-terminate brand new cables and get our way to making this thing whole again and putting Humpty Dumpty back together. It's heating up here literally and figuratively. We got the power wire to everything. I made some adjustments here and there because we did rearrange some of the pedals on the pedal board. I even changed the lift just to get it a little bit shorter. Originally I had used 1.5" lifts for the pedals, and I realized we really didn't need them that high. It was adding a lot of unnecessary weight and height to the board. So I did away with that, replaced that with a 1-inch that I had. So we have the second tier, all 1-inch. And then this back here we got to 1.5 inches just to give it a little extra height if he has to go for that tremolo. But again, this is kind of an on for an entire song type thing for Chuck, so having to hit it on and off during the show is not something that's critical in the heat of the battle. But I need to check to make sure all these power cables are working. So I wired them in first, kind of made sure that everything was in the right position, and now I want to test them. And so what I do to test them is I actually unplug from everything. So all of the pedals are going to have the power removed from them. The reason that we're doing that is that in case we have, for some reason, a cataclysmic failure where there's a reverse polarity or there's the wrong voltage or it's just reading 0 volts, we're not at any risk of damaging a pedal, and we can just make sure that everything is working properly as the voltage that we want before it actually goes into the pedal. So I'm leaving everything plugged in on the power supply end. I've just unplugged it from the pedals, and I'm going to measure each one of them to make sure that the polarity is correct and to make sure that we have the right voltage. So let's get into that. So what I'm about to do is I got the power supply fired up, and I'm just going to measure everything to make sure that it's measuring the correct voltage and that it's delivering the right polarity. So what I've got is my multimeter here, and I have it set for DC volts. And I'm going to put the black lead on the shield. I'm going to put the center lead on the tip, and I should be able to get 9 volts for the wah. So there we are, 9 volts, and it should be reading negative because I've got the red in the center here. And if it were reading positive, that would mean that I had accidentally wired one backwards. Go to the OCD, same trick. Everybody's happy. Let's make sure the wall is good. Yep, everybody's happy. So everybody's got power. Now, if we were to have a problem where we were getting an open loop, it'll say OL or anything that would show you that there's a bad connection, or you're getting 0 volts, that would mean that either you hadn't wired the ground properly or the hot properly, or there's some sort of issue with the cable. One way that you can try to test to see if there's a problem with the cable, if you were to open one up, I'm just going to open one up here as an example. So here's a already assembled cable. And an easy way to see if you could tell where the problem is you can clip the shield, and you want to set this to ohms, and then you clip the shield on this side. You should be able to read 0. If it reads something else, like this, that the loop is open, then that means that you've got a problem on that particular side. You can do the same for the center. It's a little bit tricky with these alligator leads, but they should equally read zeros. If it were to read something that shows that it's open instead of 0, that would mean you have a problem. Also, if you're on voltage and it shows 0, that would also be indicative of you having some sort of problem with the way that it was wired, and you would need to go back and troubleshoot that particular connector. Main thing that people usually make or have problems with on connectors is they may overheat the cables and they might melt them together internally, so you may need to take a little bit more of the cable apart, or maybe strip off a little bit more when you do it. It's got to be really, these are really temperature sensitive, so you want to be careful that you're in and out. You have enough heat to get the solder melted quickly, but you're also able to get out of there without having to expose the cable to prolonged heat. Using higher quality connectors is very helpful. I really like the Kobicon ones that I get off of Mauser.com. I'm going to link those below. I feel like they're very resilient. Now, one thing you'll also notice that I do on a lot of my connectors is when I close the housing, I will often add a zip tie to the end of it, because a lot of times the connectors themselves don't close very well, and so they can stay a little bit open. So by putting this zip tie around it, it just ensures that it has a nice stable connection and that it doesn't come apart, the housing doesn't move. And preferably, if these are kind of buried or hidden like they are here, these aren't going to get a big workout on the board. This is going to keep them together and make sure that the housing is staying together, that it's not being damaged, that it's not going to somehow touch something else and short it out. So those are my recommendations for power. So we're coming back on another day here to our pedal board that we're kind of revamping. One twist in the plot is that I shared some pictures with the owner, Chuck, of the rig, and showed him what we were doing, and as much as he liked it, he decided that he wanted to add another critical piece to the rig. He wanted to add an ultraphonics because he wants that Dumble overdrive sound. And if you're not familiar with the ultraphonics overdrive, it is, in my opinion, the quintessential Dumble overdrive pedal. We voiced it against several Dumble overdrive special amplifiers, the real deals, and so it really has that element through a clean style amp. It's great that he's using the pedal. It's a bummer for the context of this pedal board because we were pretty much a cable away from being done and being able to test this thing, but we're gonna make it happen. Let's get into it. So we got the rig completed. I wasn't able to fit the tremolo on there, but I talked with Chuck and he said he really does not use it at all on these power supplies that are linear, like the Voodoo Lab Pedal Power 2. As great and classic as it is, a lot of pedals will have problems if they're sat on top of this, just because of the magnetic field by the toroid transformer can sometimes create a loop area and a magnetic field that will hum through certain pedals. So I really try to avoid putting stuff directly on top of it, and didn't want to take that risk. And also, we're kind of maxed out here on power. We got a couple of different things sharing, and with that not being a requisite thing for him, I opted to just move some things around and make it so we didn't include the tremolo, but we do have a good number of pedals here. So we haven't tested it yet, although we have tested the individual components of this to make sure that all of the power cables were working, all the audio cables were working. And it's a really good idea to just test those out with your multimeter, and that's just a matter of taking your multimeter setting it to ohms, and then you're just going to, touch the corresponding sides of each cable. So if you're, for example, here on the tuner, if I wanted to make sure that I had everything passing through correctly, I'd clip the hot there, and then I would do it to its corresponding end. So it's as simple as essentially just clipping the corresponding side. So you can see here, I'm clipping the center conductor here on this plug. I have the corresponding one clipped to center. As long as this is reading 0, I'm good. If it goes to open, which on this one looks like OL, it's open loop. If it's showing that it's open and not working, then this means that you have a problem with your cable. You would repeat this also with the grounded side or the shield. So I'm just clipping it on the shield. I'm going to do the same here. And I should again see that it's reading 0s across the board. So it's reading 0s across the board here again with the shield. This is what it looks like. This is essentially what your cable tester is testing to see that it has conductivity or connectivity from side to side, both on the hot and on the shield. So that's all I'm doing here is just validating that, making sure that it works. This is a little bit easier to maneuver than a cable tester if you're trying to get things on a pedal board. So we've done that across the board. We know that we're working as far as what the measurement shows. One thing that I'll warn about is sometimes you'll get connectivity on your multimeter, or you'll get connectivity on your cable tester, like the one that I like to use from True Tone, which is a great one, and I'll link this here if people want to get one of these for themselves. The problem is that sometimes it doesn't tell you the quality of the signal. So if you have 1 or 2 strands that are connected and none of the other ones are, it may have a very weak signal, or you may have some issues with your signal that don't give you the best quality sound. It won't tell you that. So it's always a good idea to test on top of that, whether it looks good or not. You want to make sure that you're testing everything. And you'll see when I get in there, I really tug on the cables. I'm really rough with them because I really want to simulate what would happen to them in the field. If we're not tugging on the connections and really making sure that we're getting a really nice clean connection, no scratchiness, no cutouts, then that tells us that it's ready to go into the field. And again, this thing has been working well for 10 years. I haven't seen this in almost a decade. So the fact that it's held up and it's done well, and really the only reason why it's here today is to make some modifications. It's proof positive that just doing good quality soldering and really just doing everything with the kind of pedal board best practices that we're talking about today, it will give you something that has plenty of longevity and is really going to hold up well over time. So let's test this thing. Let's see how it sounds. So one of the things that I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to induce a failure. And the idea, whether you're troubleshooting or not, it's always a good idea to attempt to create a failure with any of the products that you're building new, because you want to make sure that you catch the failure here to avoid it down the line. So essentially I'm going to work my way from beginning to end, and I'm going to be shaking on the cables. I'm going to be kind of pounding on the cables and the pedals and seeing if I can cause a problem. That means that I'm going to be tugging on the input and output jacks. I'm going to be tugging on the 9 volt or whatever voltage input it has for the power, and seeing if I can create a failure. So the first thing we're plugging into is the wah. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the wah. And I'm going to see if I can cause a failure. I'm going to shake on the jacks. I'm going to see if I can cause it to fail by turning it on and off. No such problems. So then I'm going to go to the very next pedal, which is the tuner. This one's kind of easy because it's not going to work at all when you turn it off because it's made to go mute. So I'm going to tug on the jacks, be really aggressive with it, turn it off a bunch of times. No problems there. Next, I'm going to have the MXR Phase 90. I'm being rough with this thing, nothing's happening. It's crystal clear, no crackles, no nothing. Going to the next pedal. Micro flanger. Sounds kind of cool. I didn't even realize that we kind of had it set to like a Leslie thing. But let's just see if it fails. I can't get it to do anything except work. So let's go to the next one, full ton OCD. See if we can get it to fail. No problem, it's working great. Can't get anything to fail. Turn it off a few times. No problem there. Next one, we're gonna go to the Ultraphonics. Sounds normal. Let's see if we can get it to fail. Sounding good there. Let's go to the equalizer. Sounds pretty normal. I just have it set for a kind of a slight scoop to it. See if we can get it to fail. It's working fine. T-Rex replica. Sounds great. Let's see if we can get it to fail. Can't get that to fail. Let's go to the VHT. Sounds like a great slapback, actually. It sounds pretty analog-y. Let's just see if we can even get it to fail. I have the reverb on there too, which I've had on the whole time just because our bandmaster doesn't have any reverb, but let's see what happens. Sounds great. No issues there. Now, one thing I forgot is right after it hits the wah, it actually goes to the Fox Rocks Octron, which is an octave up, octave down. So I still need to test that. So let's give that one the final try and then just testing the interface and we'll be ready to go. I don't even know what to say about the Fox Rocks. It's amazing, crazy. I love this pedal. Oh, interface. We gotta make sure that works. I don't know what to say. I've tried to make this board fail. Had some fun with it in the meantime, and nothing that I seem to do works. And if that's what happens on your rig, that is a good sign that you're gonna have something that's reliable, something that is going to work long term, assuming that you soldered everything correctly, assuming that you've tested all your connections to make sure that they're all good. You definitely set yourself up for success. I think our work here is done. I think Chuck is going to be very happy. So I look forward to getting this back in his hands, as does Zeke. So there you have it. Those are my best practices for not only keeping your pedal board clean and up to date. If you want to see something a little bit more specific along these lines, we actually did a real-time version of this with John Schofield at the SF Jazz Center a few months ago, which was really, really cool. And I was only able to do sort of an abbreviated version of this, but this is a really in-depth way that you can go through, keep your stuff clean, keep it working as optimally as possible. Again, contact cleaner is such a big part of that, and just making sure that you're pulling on your cables, you're being rough with them to make sure that you've assembled them properly if you've done it yourself, or that whoever the manufacturer is has done a good job with the assembly of those cables so that you don't have any issues. So make sure you check that stuff out. If you think that there's stuff that I've been missing on this or stuff that you do that are best practices to keep your rig working, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. If you want to support the channel, there's a few ways you can do it. First of all, giving us a like, a subscribe, a comment, those things all help. If you want to try out any of our Vertex products, I'm going to link our store page below. We have lots of really cool overdrives, distortions, boosters, all different sorts of things. And then we also have our brand new Nile compressor, which I'm going to show right up here. We have a cool video that we just did with one of my favorite LA players, Tim Stewart. So be sure to check that out. And until next time, I'm Uncle Mason, the Rig Doctor. Adios.